Our next project is based off of the work of artist Keith Haring. So before we can begin, I wanted to go over a little bit of background history about him and his work. So to get started, Keith Haring was born on May 4th, 1958 in Pennsylvania. He grew up in a home where his father was a cartoonist, so he was around some artwork as well. He grew up not very interested in most of the art that he saw at typical galleries. He felt that they were too formal. He wasn't interested in creating the art either because he thought, once again, that it was too formal. So he liked thinking outside of the box. He was more interested in the art of the pop artists like Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein, who were considered unconventional artists in the art world. These artists, along with other pop artists' work, was shaped by what was considered to be pop culture, so things that were in television commercials, cartoons, comic strips, and advertisements during that time period. These two pieces that we see here are examples of pop art. The one over here on the left is by pop artist Andy Warhol, and the one over here on the right is by artist Roy Lichtenstein. Both very vibrant in color, both depicting a particular person that was popular during that specific time, so very similar styles. Keith Haring started out as a street artist, and so a lot of his work began in the subways during the 1980s is when he began his career in New York City. And what he would do is he would find these blank panels that the city would put advertisements on, and he would go in with chalk and create these symbolic images. A couple more examples. So this is final work that we see over here on the left, and here we can see Keith Haring actually drawing in. So he would drop off of the subway, and he would find once again these black panels before they would put the advertisements on, and he would go in with the chalk drawings and create his work of art. Now, a lot of street art is considered to be called what is known as graffiti or graffiti art. And once again, this was not traditional art. It wasn't in the formal setting, so of course it inspired Keith Haring. And he saw this graffiti art all around him in New York City, and so he wanted to take advantage of that and kind of stem from his inspiration and create these graffiti or street type drawings seen in the subways. So when people hear about graffiti, it instantly gets kind of a bad rap. And so there are some positive aspects to graffiti or graffiti art. And that is that, one, the person creating it is spontaneous, and they're very good about their spontaneity. The detail that they're able to create with the spontaneity is really great. They're very creative. It can be seen by all, so it's not something that you have to pay to see in a museum or an exhibit. But of course, the main positive aspect of a graffiti art is that there is prior permission. It's not done illegally without the city or the person knowing that the artwork is created on. The negative effects of graffiti art is that it is destructive, it's illegal, there was no prior consent. It's typically gang related, so it has no artistic direction, no creative element whatsoever. Now, although Keith Haring didn't have prior permission, he was careful to draw on black panels. So there was no destruction of this private property. He wasn't destroying the subway tiles as we see here. He was using chalk, which is easily removable. He wasn't using spray paint or permanent paint. So all of his pieces, in reality, could have been washed away, could have been wiped away, could have been painted over, and so forth. So some of the characteristics that we see in the majority of Keith Haring's works is that he incorporates all of these bold black outlines around his symbols. He used simplified and stylized figures. A lot of students that I have asked why they don't have faces or more detail. Well, if you think about it, if you're a street artist and you're working fast to complete your drawings on walls and so forth, you're going to work very quickly, and because of that, you're not going to use a whole lot of detail. Figures are also surrounded by rhythmic lines that make them appear vibrant or move. And so if we continue on to a couple more of His artworks, we can see that we have the bold black outline around his symbolic images. We have the vibrating lines as well to represent vibration and movement. A couple other characteristics of his drawings that we often see within his paintings. We see this radiating baby, we see the dogs, we see a lot of dancing people, and sometimes flying saucers. And these are just a few of his symbolic images that he uses. Keith Haring created his own visual language. His symbols appear repeatedly in different artworks of his. This type of pictorial writing system is known as pictographs. And so as we see here, circled in blue, green, red, orange, and purple, we're able to see a couple more of his symbols. We see a pyramid, we see figures, we see radiating baby, spaceship, and dog. Because Keith Haring's work appealed to so many different types of people, it brought a human touch to the dingy and dirty subway stations. It kind of made it a little bit more humorous, and people were stopping to actually look at these pieces being created. His images were whimsical, often humorous, and somewhat mysterious. Instead of looking like typical graffiti art, his poster-sized drawings looked like they were supposed to be there. So his work started out as these simple white on black figures, but soon he developed into complex compositions, crammed with dancing, pulsating figures, and he started to create these in other places other than the subway stations. And so he then started using color within his work, started creating a little bit more storyline, started painting them on canvases, and so forth. So a couple of his images and what they symbolize. The one that we see here, he used dolphins to symbolize peace and love within his work. We often see two humans holding a heart, which means romantic love. His three-eyed smiley face means greed or joy. And so his work incorporated a lot of meaning and symbolism. An example of this, he became a voice for AIDS during the 1980s. So we see two of his works here. He created works that kind of brought awareness to drug addiction, freedom. He worked a lot with kids and kind of incorporating their voice within the city. A couple more examples here. You may have heard the term crack is whack before, and that stems from one of Keith Haring's work, Crack is Whack, which was created after one of his studio assistants became addicted to crack. As Keith Haring became famous, his artworks also became increasingly more and more expensive. And so to ensure that his art continued to be available at affordable prices, which was key to the general public, he created what was known as the Pop Shop, which was located in New York City. And here he sold prints, stickers, buttons, and other various products that incorporated his artwork on it, and once again at an affordable price. So this is just a close-up view of his Pop Shop. So it's almost an artwork in itself. In addition to his subway art and his paintings, he also created three-dimensional sculptures. This one we can see here being a little bit more interactive. And so in 1988, Keith Haring was diagnosed with the AIDS virus, that same virus that he was raising awareness for in his artwork. And at that time, there was little known about the disease, and very few survived during this time. So in 1989, he started the Keith Haring Foundation to provide funding for AIDS organizations and children's programs. He then died at the age of 31. So for our project, what we're going to be doing is creating a Keith Haring inspired poster that focuses on a particular social issue that you see occurring within our school, within your neighborhood, throughout the city, across the world. And we're going to go ahead and research a variety of these different social issues and discuss them as a class so that we can kind of narrow it down to one that you feel particularly driven by. What you're going to then do is after you pick your social issue, you're then going to use symbols used that are going to mimic that of Keith Haring's symbols and his work. And this way, when you create your composition using these symbols, you should have a clear message pertaining to your particular issue. You need to include thick, bold outlines as well as bold colors in the foreground. And your background should also mimic the pattern designs used within his work as well. So I want to show some past examples that can be found on my classroom webpage of different social issues and how students have incorporated not only similar symbols that Keith Haring used, but also their own. So this one here we see for the LGBT community for equality. This next one we see symbols representing women, equality, and rights. This next one pertaining to drug addiction and raising awareness for drug addiction. This one incorporates pollution, so awareness for what we're kind of doing to the environment and so forth. This one kind of have a little bit of text lingo, but we have the everybody love everybody, so equal rights for all. This one pertains to childhood obesity. And this last one has a lot of symbolism in it for representation for marriage equality. We have the two people that are fighting for marriage equality. We have the government that's kind of making the overall decisions, which kind of let us know if we can have our basic freedom and our basic rights. So those are just a couple of ideas that kind of give you inspiration and get you started.